Atheists deny God exists. Agnostics declare it can't be known. Most who accept God's existence also believe there is no proof of it. This is part 2 of 5 covering proof that God exists. His existence need not be taken on faith. Many just do not realize that science conclusively proves the existence of God. Any true God would never leave his creation, mankind, in doubt about whether he exists. Despite widespread controversy, you can know with absolute certainty that an all-intelligent mind created the universe and all life on earth. Part 1 brought evidence from astronomy, biology, chemistry, and mathematics. Now comes even more stunning, yet largely little-known proofs. Some lengthy quotes will appear, but they are all worth the time taken because after completing this series, your belief in God will stand on bedrock.
The world to come. The Restored Church of God presents David C. Pack, author of 80 books and booklets, editor-in-chief of the Real Truth magazine, read by countless and growing numbers in every nation and territory of the world. In a violent age, full of bad news, answering life's greatest questions straight from the Bible and announcing the wonderful good news of the world to come. And now, David C. Pack.
We pick up where we left off with the concept of irreducible complexity. Recall that Charles Darwin himself wrote in The Origin of Species, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. You will see that Darwin would today say his theory has failed utterly. Its many breakdowns mean it cannot be true. He would say this. Sadly, he's not here to tell us to drop his theory, that it's false. If only people would believe Charles Darwin's own rules governing his ideas. No one would believe evolution. Back from the grave, he would be the first to disown the theory of evolution. We start with an example of molecular machines to better appreciate the complexity of cells. Japanese and German scientists have now discovered the smallest of nature's machines called tiny engines. Advanced research on these remarkable super small engines of life begs the question, where did they come from? A group of Japanese scientists exploring the crystal structure of F1-ATPase enzyme discovered nature's own rotary engine, no bigger than 10 billionths by 10 billionths by 8 billionths of a meter. The tiny motor includes the equivalent of an engine block, drive shaft, and 3 pistons. It runs at speeds between 1/2 and 4 revolutions per second. This motor not only ranks as the smallest ever seen, it also represents the smallest motor that the laws of physics and chemistry will allow. In Germany, a research team used new instruments to examine an enormous molecule, the yeast 26S proteasome. Though not the largest molecule in existence, this one contains over 2 million protons and neutrons and is the largest non-symmetrical molecule mapped to date. This molecule can only be described as a wonder. It serves as an intracellular waste disposal and recycling system. Recognize such an organism could never have evolved gradually. This is literally impossible. Now another amazing quote about a single, truly incredible organism. It is necessarily long to illustrate the complexity of just one molecular machine. This fascinating understanding about your body is more than worth the time taken to read it. In many biological structures, proteins are simply components of larger molecular machines. Like the picture tube, wires, metal bolts, and screws that comprise a television, many proteins are part of structures that only function when virtually all of the components have been assembled. A good example of this is a cilium. Cilia are hair-like organelles on the surfaces of many animal and lower plant cells that serve to move fluid over the cell's surface or to row single cells through a fluid. In humans, for example, epithelial cells lining the respiratory tract each have about 200 cilia that beat in synchrony to sweep mucus towards the throat for elimination. Already amazing, we're just warming up. A cilium consists of a membrane-coated bundle of fibers called an axoneme. An axoneme contains a ring of 9 double microtubules surrounding 2 central single microtubules. Each outer doublet consists of a ring of 13 filaments, subfiber A, fused to an assembly of 10 filaments, subfiber B. The filaments of the microtubules are composed of 2 proteins called alpha and beta tubulin. The 11 microtubules forming an axoneme are held together by 3 types of connectors. Subfibers A are joined to the central microtubules by radial spokes. Adjacent outer doublets are joined by linkers that consist of a highly elastic protein called nexin, and the central microtubules are joined by a connecting bridge. Finally, every subfiber A bears 2 arms, an inner arm and an outer arm, both containing the protein dynein. But how does a cilium work? The fascination grows greater. Experiments have indicated that the ciliary motion results from the chemically powered walking of the dynein arms on one microtubule up the neighboring subfiber B of a second microtubule so that the 2 microtubules slide past each other. However, the protein cross-links between microtubules in an intact cilium prevent neighboring microtubules from sliding past each other by more than a short distance. These crosslinks convert the dynein-induced sliding motion to a bending motion of the entire axoneme. Now let us sit back, review the workings of the cilium, and consider what it implies. Cilia are composed of at least a half dozen proteins: alpha-tubulin, beta-tubulin, dynein, nexin, spoke protein, and a central bridge protein. These combine to perform one task: ciliary motion, and all of these proteins must be present for the cilium to function. If the tubulins are absent, then there are no filaments to slide. If the dynein is missing, then the cilium remains rigid and motionless. If nexin or the other connecting proteins are missing, then the axoneme falls apart when the filaments slide. What we see in the cilium, then, is not just profound complexity, but also irreducible complexity on the molecular scale. This was terribly complicated, but that's the point. All of this evolved by blind, dumb luck? On this alone, no wonder God declares, "The fool has said, there is no God." But should not even fools doubt this could happen? Organisms are all complicated, some wonderfully so, and yet they cannot be reduced, diminished, or simplified in complexity. They had to come into being exactly as they are, because they never could have arrived at their present condition gradually. We should stand in awe of any God great enough just to design and create cilia. Let's now journey deep into the cells of all living organisms. This will be unlike any trip you have ever taken. There appears a world of such exquisite detail, design, complexity, interdependence, and specificity as to boggle the mind. Let's start painting. A brief discussion of proteins and sequencing is necessary. To form a protein, amino acids must link together to form a chain. Amino acids form functioning proteins only when they adopt very specific sequential arrangements, like properly sequenced letters in an English sentence. Thus, amino acids alone do not make proteins any more than letters alone make poetry. In both cases, the sequencing of the constituent parts determines the function of the whole. Explaining the origin of the specific sequencing of proteins and DNA lies at the heart of the current crisis in materialistic evolutionary thinking. Proteins must appear in exact sequences to cause specific chemical reactions or build specific structures within the cells. This action is called specificity. It is because of specificity that proteins cannot substitute for one another. They are as different in purpose as an axe, drill, hammer, or screwdriver. Let's summarize the enormous difficulty of believing DNA happened by chance. The complexity and intricacy of the DNA molecule, combined with the staggering amount of chemically coded information it contains, speaks unerringly to the fact that this supermolecule simply could not have happened by blind chance. It is not possible for a code of any kind to arise by chance or accident. A code is the work of an intelligent mind. Even the cleverest dog or chimpanzee could not work out a code of any kind. It is obvious then that chance cannot do it. This could no more have been the work of chance or accident than could the Moonlight Sonata be played by mice running up and down the keyboard of my piano. Codes do not arise from chaos. Now another source. Atheist Richard Dawkins has admitted the more statistically improbable a thing is, the less we can believe it just happened by blind chance. Superficially, the obvious alternative to chance is an intelligent designer. The source book later states, that is the very point the theist is stressing. An intelligent designer is demanded by the available evidence. The famous Dr. Carl Sagan wrote about DNA. The information content of a simple cell has been estimated as around 10 to the 12th power, or 1 trillion bits. He put this number into perspective. That if one were to count every letter of every word of every book in the world's largest library, over 10 million volumes, the final tally would be approximately 1 trillion letters. Thus, a single cell contains the equivalent information content of more than 10 million volumes. Nothing works unless everything works at the same time. DNA could not have gradually come